Pittsburgh Steelers fans, it is time for another edition of the Curtain Call podcast. My name is Michael Beck, your deputy editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. As always, I am joined by the film guru of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, one Mr. Geoffrey Benedict. Geoffrey, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing really good. I'm excited for today's show, Mike.
Oh, I am too. We're talking punters. It doesn't get better than that, especially with our guest today. Special guest from the Rumble seat, that is Georgia Tech's SB Nation site, Nishant Prasadh. I think I got it right this time. Again, thank you for your time tonight. How's it going?
Not too bad. How are y'all doing?
Quite well, I'd say. Really, to just jump into things right away. The Steelers drafted with their last pick in the 2021 NFL draft. One Mr. Presley Harvin III, probably the biggest punter anyone's ever seen. Could you just kind of tell us a little bit more about him and what kind of player the Steelers just got?
Yeah, of course. I mean, maybe the best way to say it is just that, you know, if you had access to the Slack channel that we use on our site, you would have seen how excited we were to see that he got taken. Because this is, Presley is, I mean, one, he's an amazing punter. He's had a lot of opportunities to punt over the last few years. That should tell you something about how our team has been. And for the punter to be one of the most popular and arguably the best player on the team in that time is, you know, it's not just about the team. It's about how good he is. He's got a booming leg. He's a really good guy on and off the field, a leader on the team. You know, I know it's weird. Like, how do you get excited about drafting a punter? But I mean, the best I can say is that y'all got a good one here.
So what are his best attributes as a punter when he's actually punting the ball? What's he best for?
Sure. I mean, the biggest thing is just he's got a booming leg. I mean, I think his long this past season was something like 70 yards. And to be honest, I don't remember how much of that was airtime versus roll, but he can hit it a good 50, 60 yards in the air. And he's just, I think that's the biggest thing you're getting is he's like he can get a lot of power behind it. I think if he had an issue over his career, it was just that, you know, maybe a little more prone to shank one than some others. But you know, again, it wasn't that common for it to happen. He, I believe, led either the ACC or the country in punting average this past year. So, you know, in the end, he was a good one. And hey, if you ever need him to run a fake, he once threw a touchdown pass against Miami, and it was a dime. So.
Oh, yeah, that clip definitely circled the rounds a few times once that pick was announced. But I guess that kind of leads nicely in my next question for you. Is there one specific Presley Harvin moment that kind of sticks out most in your mind?
It's got to be that touchdown pass. And I know that's, but it just seeing a punter do that and the fact that it was in a win over Miami was just awesome. But beyond that, you know, I wish I could point to one specific punt and just say, oh man, how did he do that? But maybe the one that comes to mind is I think it was that 70-yard punt against UCF last year. Like, this was a game where Tech was kind of in it for a while and then became overmatched against a pretty good UCF team. But, you know, when you're able to flip the field like that, you know, back deep in your own territory and just punt it 50, 60 yards and, you know, essentially back them up, it was... I say it's hard to point to one specific one because he did it quite a few times for us. And yeah, again, it would have made a much rougher time without him being able to pin teams deep like that.
One of the things with punters is obviously people don't view them as being like that important to a team. For example, his highest number of punts was 80, which means like he had a great impact, but it was for 80 plays over the course of a 12-game season. Like, how valuable are they? And I wanted to ask you, is there a game you can think of that stands out in his playing time there where you're like, you know what? With a lesser punter, we probably lose that game, that, you know, a game that we won.
You know, I wish there was one I could point to specifically. If I looked back on his stats from that Miami game, like even setting aside even setting aside his prolific passing in that game, I'm pretty sure he had one or two in that one that helped to sort of push Miami back, because that was certainly that was the first big win of the Jeff Collins tenure, and it was one where like all three phases of the game were necessary. So I wish I could point to one specific game offhand. It's just not coming to me right this minute. But Yeah, I mean, as you said, like he punted 80 times this past year, which not a lot of plays in the aggregate, but for a punter, that's a lot of times to be on the field. And there were very few times when, he didn't really deliver when he was out there.
Now, punters today, like I'd say if you describe one as like the average punters, it's typically like this Australian lanky, just super Caucasian person. And then you have Presley Harvin, an African-American, built like a linebacker. What was your first thought when you saw him take the field? Were you like, wow, this completely shatters barriers of punters that I've thought of for my entire life, really?
So it's interesting because he's not even the first black punter to take the field for Georgia Tech in the last 20, 25 years. Tech had a guy named Rodney Williams back in, I want to say the early 2000s, who I believe also went on to play in the NFL. But yeah, I mean, as you say, there are so many stereotypes that he breaks just by being on the field as a punter. I can't remember when it came out. I think it was around when the Ray Guy Award was about to be announced. But there was an article published in the Undefeated that kind of looked at just how why are there so few black specialists in the game? And one of the case studies they looked at was Harvin, and they talked about how. When he was a prospect in school, he looked at, he was a good enough athlete to play, any other position. So they were like, yeah, do you want to play running back, linebacker, or something else? And he actually, I believe in high school, had a talk with his parents and came to the decision that he wanted to stay a punter because it seemed like his best path to a long NFL career where, if you play a linebacker, you're going to be beaten up on every single play. Maybe your earning potential is higher, but if you actually want to last for a decade, if you can be a good punter, that's your road to success. So, I mean, as far as what he was like on campus, I mean, I think as soon as he took the field, he just, like I said, he breaks the mold so much that it was just, oh man, what can this guy do? And within his first few punts, you could just see his potential with how far he was booming it. And, by the end, he was a fan favorite. So the story writes itself.
Now, he has a pretty solid reputation, both off the field and with his work ethic. And I've heard some coaches and players say that he works harder than any other kicker or punter that they've been around. Can you speak to that at all? Can you say what you've heard about that or what people know about that?
I mean, yeah, like everything you've described is essentially the reputation he has on campus. He's not the most, outgoing, gregarious guy, but he's one of those guys who, he comes to work, he gets the job done. It's quiet leadership is the best way I'd describe it. It's been a weird few years for specialists at Tech. We've struggled with the kicking game ever since Harrison Butker left. So it's been nice to have at least one specialist who's been reliable. And yeah, I've never heard a bad thing about him off the field. He's just, he's gotten along with all his teammates. He's never been in even a hint of trouble. So, certainly coming out of Tech, there was no, not even a hint of a warning sign.
So the Steelers ask more out of their punters than just punting the ball. Of course, they want them to be involved in holding duties. I know some teams across the NFL have their punters doing kickoffs. Did he hold the ball on field goals? And did he ever take the field for any other situations, or has he strictly been a punter?
He was the holder. So he was the holder on the field goal unit at times. And I'm racking my brain to think exactly when in his career he was. I do remember one instance where they actually had him run a fake where he just took a direct snap and ran as the holder. It didn't work, but it wasn't his fault. He actually, strangely, I don't believe he ever did kickoffs for us, which is kind of odd with, how strong his leg is. I think it might have just been a choice to just let, have kickers focus on that. Actually, I say I don't believe that, and now I'm starting to question whether that's true. Might even try to go check his stats to be sure, but I believe he just focused on punting while he was there. And sorry, stumbled over my train of thought. Yeah, it was kind of strange. I mean, there were even times where, so for the last couple of years at Tech, and, this isn't of as much interest to y'all, I guess, but we had a really bad kicking situation where just, the Coach Collins didn't even really trust his kickers from beyond about 30 yards. And so, internally we wondered, why don't you just send Presley out there? He might not have ever placed kicks, but give him a try. So they never did. But, all that to say, yeah, I don't see any reason why he couldn't do that, but why he couldn't do kickoffs or spend a lot of time holding. It wouldn't surprise me if he ends up being the holder for y'all, but he doesn't have much kickoff experience that I know of.
Gotcha.
Okay. I actually looked up his numbers from that Georgia Tech game, from the Georgia Tech Miami game. And outside of that pass, he had 6 punts for 273 yards, averaged 45.5 yards per punt. So yeah. Yeah, in a game that Tech took him to overtime, that touchdown pass and 6 really good punts, probably, that's a win that you can definitely say the punter had a huge part in.
Yeah. It's like I said, that particular game, it just stands out because it's maybe the only bright spot we've had in 2 years. But yeah, it was definitely an all phases experience. So I don't think we had any field goals in that game. So yeah, it really was just he threw that pass, but really it was just pin him downfield as much as you can because Miami was very mistake prone that day.
One more question for me, Nishant, before we let you out of here.
Sure.
Were you surprised that he was drafted, or was that something everyone was kind of expecting?
It was kind of on the fence going in. Obviously we were hoping he would be picked. I think if you asked anyone on our staff, we think he's the best. I think everyone would say he's the best punter in the country, but there were other guys who had a claim to it. I mean, to be completely fair, the other 2 guys he beat out for the Ray guy, Jake Camarda and Lou Headley, were both very good punters. I remember seeing him listed as the 4th or 5th punter in some pre-draft rankings. And, how often do you see 4 or 5 punters go in a draft? So, we were braced for the possibility that he might not go. And as we drifted into the 240s and so in the draft, it's like, all right, how many of these teams left are looking for a punter? But we actually knew the Steelers were one of the teams that might be looking for one. So it's just fingers crossed. And then it happened. So, it's like I said, not too many punters go. So I don't think it would have been disappointing, but not shocking if he hadn't gotten drafted. Obviously very happy he's getting the opportunity in Pittsburgh. And I think he will, if y'all are already excited for him, I have a good feeling he'll live up to it.
Geoffrey, is there anything else you want to add on?
No, I'm good.
Perfect. Nishant, before you go, is there anything you want to plug?
I'm not good at that part of it, but no, yeah, I mean, I've been writing for From the Rumble Seat for a few years. So yeah, we've been covering the team for a while. Had a couple fun pieces on Presley, I think, over that time. So yeah, I don't have a personal presence, so I certainly won't plug anything like that. But yeah, come check out the site if you want to see any more of what we write.
Beautiful. Awesome stuff. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Cheers. Thanks so much, guys. It's been fun.
Yeah, see, it was our pleasure. And, of course, Steeler fans, just hang tight. There's more stuff we're going to get to here. And we're going to stick along with the punter talk, at least for the first half of the show. And on top of that, I know we will have a punting expert join us at the end of the first half of the show. So we will get there when that guest is ready. That's a bit of a special surprise for each and every one of you out there. But Geoffrey, just to throw to you first, did you like the punter pick? Like I know it was like the 3rd last pick of the draft, so something like that. But did you like the pick, or do you kind of wish that they try to chase him as like an undrafted guy, or what were your overall thoughts when they took Presley Harvin III?
Oh, I loved it. But then I was a huge fan when the Steelers selected Daniel Sepulveda because
4th round.
similar to Presley Harvin, he had great punts. And he had incredible hang time on his punts. And then, of course, he gets to the NFL, and there's all kinds of rumors, whether it was an injury or he got like crazy in the weight room and ended up ruining like some of his form. There's all kinds of ideas about what happened to him, but it was gone. He wasn't kicking like that again. But I absolutely love Presley Harvin III.
Yeah, no, I do too. Like, I should bring up the super chat first before I finish my thought. This is from Double H, or I guess Double HH. I guess would be the correct way to say it. The way it's written out here. He puts $19.99 in the tip jar. Thank you so much for that. That means a lot. Thank you so much. He says, for the sweet lineup of this show, of course, we have the Georgia Tech guy and the punting expert that Geoffrey and I are really excited about. So you need to stay tuned for that by the time we get there. It was an expensive guest, so I actually hope that he comes on and lives up to his word. But for Presley Harvin III, like when they picked him, I was genuinely super excited. I hate to say it, but because he's just so different from your typical punter, and he's so good, like his film just jumps off. Like when Sepulveda was drafted, did you see like were there similarities in that tape, or was it something like? Are they comparable, or is this like as good of a punting prospect as Daniel Sepulveda once was? A decade ago now?
Okay, so I actually tried kicking in college. I went to a little tiny school, and their kicker got hurt, and like somebody knew me, and they were like, "Hey, you used to play soccer," and I was like, "Yeah, my leg was not good," and I pulled like 3 muscles on their tryout, and it was like they were like, "Okay, yeah, no to you." But I had become through that. I'd looked into how to transfer, how to like learn how to kick and learn how to punt. And so I'd gotten into some communities that were kind of like really nerdy punting and kicking communities. And that's how I actually got excited about Daniel Sepulveda, because he was like the chosen one, like right for among punters, because his hang time was just significantly better than everyone else's. A lot of people have kind of caught up to those numbers, and Presley Harvin is in that territory. But at that time, Sepulveda was above everybody else. So that's how I got into that. I'm still kind of a bit of a kicking nerd, and I'm super excited for Presley Harvin. One of my favorite stories, it was from an article I read, is in one of the games, he kicked a 54-yard punt. They got a 2-yard return, right? So 52 net on this punt, and they got called for an illegal formation. So they get backed up, and he gets to punt it again. He kicks it 62 yards in the air. It hits at the 4-yard line and bounces directly sideways, and they pin him inside the 5-yard line to make it even worse. And they were just like, they talked about like he has that kind of competitiveness. And also like his talk, man, he talks like a punter. You can tell he really is into the technique. He's really into the work, honing his craft, kind of the AV thing. He is working on his craft, always trying to get better. He talks about, the sweet spot on your foot, the sweet spot on a ball, how to get, more out of your B kicks and your C kicks when you don't hit it exactly right. Like, this is a guy who has put in the work, who really gets it, and who really, really, focuses on his craft. He's not going to be, an idiot kicker, a Jeff Reed who gets the NFL and goes out and drinks and gets in fights with public bathroom equipment. He's just, I'm so pumped for this to get this guy in here and see him punt. I'm also a big fan, as you know, of punt cover teams, gunners, all that work. I love watching film on it, and he really works hard with his gunners, with his other players, to be like where he puts it, so that he puts it in the right spot for him to make a play. He watches film on the other team's return teams and what kind of stuff they like to do. Like, this is the guy you want. He is a guy. He's going to be great. I can't wait for it.
Man, we should have listed you as the punting expert on this one. That was some great insight, Geoffrey. My goodness.
I'm a punting nerd. I'm not an expert. I don't know. Like,
I didn't know this though. This is good stuff.
Oh man, I love the idea of it, because it's one thing. You drop the ball, you swing your leg, and you've got to be better at it than everybody else, than like so many people, just to even have a chance. So I love the idea of it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree too. And before we pull our guest up here, I'm not sure if never mind, the camera's working. So we are going to pull the guest up now. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a Pittsburgh punting expert. Geoffrey and I have been talking about doing this for a couple months. In anticipation of the show, we couldn't be more excited to bring you one Mr. Jefferson Hartman from BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, your senior editor and punting expert. Jeff, how you doing tonight?
I'm here for the Jordan Berry hate fan club. Am I in the right spot? I'm not sure if I clicked the right link or not.
I think you're in the right place. Oh goodness, we've been looking forward to this show, and we knew it was going to be a lot of fun, especially having you on here. Just off the top, do you think there's any doubt in your mind who the starting punter is going to be this year, or is that little weasel going to keep his way in Pittsburgh?
Well, I mean, Weasel Boy, we thought he was going to be out of town last year, and, the Weasels find their way back. I mean, they're tough to get rid of, and, they bring in Colquitt, everyone's like, yay! I mean, I think I wanted to headline the Cuts article with Jordan Berry is finally gone. I didn't do that, but still, I don't know. If it doesn't happen this year, you have to wonder if it ever will. And I'm sick of the excuse of, well, he's a holder for Chris Boswell. I mean, my gosh, someone a backup quarterback, get Mason Rudolph to hold. I don't care. Someone at this point in time, I don't know. And a lot of it had to do with, I really like the punter. I like Presley Harvin, Big Press, as I call him, because he's a monster in the weight room. Like, this isn't just the fact that he's a punter that could replace Jordan Berry. It's also the fact that I like everything about this kid is unique. Everything from the fact of his skin color. I mean, that's something that is not talked about often, but there's not many black punters in the NFL. Ever since, who's the guy, the Raiders? You always wanted to bring him back,
Marquette
Michael.
King. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, since he left, I don't think there are any more. And that's not a racist thing. That's just a factual thing. At the same time, you look at, he's 250 pounds. And the guy squatted like 600 something. I don't know if it was 600 pounds. But
I think it was
close. I mean, he's huge. He's awesome. When you hear guys like Pat McAfee, which I know Steelo Chick is talking about in the live chat right now, he's definitely touting this guy as a really good kicker. I'm hopeful that the Steelers could finally have a punter that rivals people like Sam Cook of the Ravens. And I live in Maryland, so I have to watch a lot of the Ravens games. And not only that, I want to watch the Ravens games. I don't know how many times this guy's done this to the Steelers and so many other teams where you're like, oh, okay, they've got him pinned back there. The opposition is going to have great field position, 65-yard punt, and they flip the field, and then they're screwed in their own zone. And you're like, what the heck? The Steelers have never had that as long as I can remember. Not Sepulveda, not Josh Miller. I'm sure Geoffrey Benedict will bring up some unobscure punter from Steelers past. But still, when was the last time they had a good punter? I can't remember.
Yeah, well, actually, this is something I wanted to talk to you about, because we're talking here with the president of the Jordan Berry anti-fan club.
Yes.
Hate club.
Jordan Berry, do you know where he ranks all time for punting with the Steelers?
Very high. Very high.
He is fourth all time. Only Craig Colquitt, Josh Miller, and Bobby Walden. People may remember him. He was punted for most of the Steel Curtain days. Okay. 1968 to like 77. So he was there for most of those years. He's fourth. And what stands out even better is among people with at least 100 punts for the Steelers, he is third in yards per punt.
I believe all of that. And honestly, yeah. I had someone on Twitter who it always goes against me. I'll say bad stuff about Jordan Berry almost daily. And this guy is always coming back. He's not that bad. When you look at it in Steeler history, which tells you just how awful the Steelers have been as a punting organization since 1933, you look at his numbers against other punters in the NFL right now, and it's not very good. Middle of the road at best. His average is okay. But it's never been about the leg strength. It's been about consistency. This guy is good for a shank every single game. That can't happen. That would be like a professional golfer being guaranteed to shank a ball off the tee once a round. Is that player going to be playing on the tour very long? I wouldn't think so. I mean, that's like Tiger Woods. Every time he gets he's due for a shank once out of these 18 holes. Let's see which one it is today, folks. It's just not going to happen. He shanks one, and it always seemed to be at the very worst time. I think the one that comes to mind for some reason, I don't know the year, if Brian or Dave were on it, maybe you guys know, the year they lost to Tampa Bay at home, and it was a game that they never should have lost. Mike Glennon was the quarterback.
Yeah.
The Steelers had a 3-and-out. You're thinking, okay, there's not a lot of time left. Get a big punt, shanks it like 15 yards, and I'm sitting there saying to myself, probably by myself, I could punt the ball further than that. Literally, I can punt it 40 yards, sure. Maybe with some roll, but still, he punted it like 15 yards. Don't get me started, guys. I'm just getting.
This is why we wanted to get you on.
Ben Roethlisberger can punt better than that.
Yeah.
We've seen him do it. Like,
and he's left-footed. He's left-footed. People don't realize that. He's kicks left-footed.
Different spins backwards instead of I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird that he's left-footed.
With Presley Harvin, though, like we talk about the history of the Steelers punters and like how terrible it is. Yeah. If he came out this year, led the league in punting, in net punts and everything, and then hung up his cleats, said, I'm done. Mic drop. I was the best punter for 1 year. Would he be the best punter in Steelers history? 1 year as the top guy? Like is that how bad this position's been?
Yes, and everyone's going to bring up old man Colquitt, who won the Super Bowls back in the day and all that stuff. But at the same time, it's one of those situations where I knew I was coming on because I've messaged you guys. You guys we were talking in the Slack channel today. And I literally was at the pool with my kids, and I'm sitting there, and they're jumping all over me like hyenas. And I'm thinking to myself, who was the last legitimate punter the Steelers have had? Like, legitimate. And I couldn't think of one. I knew that Geoffrey was going to name I don't know, Dick Shiner probably kicked a few punts back in the day, or Buzz Nutter. One of those two guys probably had a couple punts on their record. But still, I'm like, hey, this is unbelievable. I can't even think of a good punter. Because Josh Miller, I don't remember him being that great either. You know, I remember him.
He was streaky, but there were some seasons he was really good.
I remember him more for being on the radio and Bill Cowher yelling at him for sitting on his helmet. That's what I remember Josh Miller for. And wearing his hat backwards, looking like a clown on the sideline. But I mean, Daniel Sepulveda, if he didn't have ACLs made out of like paper mache, maybe he could have been okay. And what did they spend, a 4th round pick on him out of Baylor?
Yeah.
Holy cow. And people were saying they wasted draft stock taking Presley Harvin, the 2nd, 7th round pick, the last pick. They're like, oh, they could have drafted someone else. If this guy's their starter and he wins the job and he does a good job, he's your punter for how many years? The next decade plus? You should think so. I don't know. It's bad.
Well, I want to jump in because one of the things we're talking about is it's very hard to judge punters today against the pass. Because like I was talking with Michael, Daniel Sepulveda, after he came out, like the times he was putting up for hang times and the distances he was getting, they're common now.
Yeah.
Like then it was like, holy crap, nobody kicks this way. Nobody is this good of a punter in the NFL. He's better than everyone we've seen punt in like history. You know, it's almost like the Steph Curry, you know, kind of thing where he comes out and he starts shooting threes and making them, and then all of a sudden everyone else is learning and being like, hey, we can do that too. The game has changed. Punting has changed. And the punters today, like you said, yeah, Jordan Berry does not rank well with punters across the NFL. But if you look at Steelers history, he looks incredible simply because over the last 10 years, punters have drastically improved.
And I've learned more about punting since they drafted Presley Harvin. You listen to Danny Smith, he's talking about how it's not just the big leg. He's got to have more finesse inside to pin him deep. And I hate, what I really hate is I feel like punters, the statistics, they should have an inside the 20 statistic, which is justifiable, but then also an inside the 10. Like, show me, like, because if a Steelers drive stalls at the 50-yard line, inside the 20 is not good enough for me. That should be inside the 10. Like, let's set a new standard here, folks, and let's have inside the 10. That's impressive. Whatever happened to the coffin corner, too? Whatever happened to people trying to, like, go for the corners? That's very rare. It's almost like I blame the Australians. I know some of them are in the live chat right now. They probably messed and, Jordan Berry is Australian. It's nothing against the country or the continent itself.
Well,
it's kind of strange. But anyways, it's that whole kicking the point of the ball, Aussie stuff. I don't know. Anyways.
We do have a super chat here that I really want to bring up from Austin Smith. He puts $5 in the tip jar, and he asked if we can get Hallelujah performed live by one Jeff Hartman if Jordan Berry gets cut by the end of camp. What do you say, Jeff? Would you do that for the people?
First and foremost, that's Canadian dollars. That's not real $5. That's like fake. That's like Monopoly money. But anyways, I'll enter.
It goes a long way up here.
Canuck bucks is what we call it on the preview. I will perform. But I don't know. See, I read that. I saw it on the live chat. I read it. I'm thinking, okay, if week one, no, I can't do it week one because last year, week one was Dustin Colquitt and the Weasel Boy finds his way back. So at what point can we seriously say the Weasel Boy's gone? Like, and he's not coming back. Like, we got rid of the Weasel. Like, is it the bye in week 7? Is it halfway through the season. Well, there's no halfway point anymore. Stupid 17 games, but still, like, what is the point? I'll gladly do a performance of something. I'll pull out the guitar. I'll do it on Let's Ride. You have to tune in. I have no problem with that. Seriously. So land down under. That's what Mark Davis said of this.
I see that.
No, seriously, let's talk about this. At what point do we say, okay, Jordan Berry's actually gone for good, barring injury?
Considering last year, I almost want to say like the playoffs. Like that, it scares me a little bit, but honestly.
Yeah, at what point is a punter too old to punt? Because I think Jordan Berry probably has to be like, I was sitting there thinking, yeah, if he gets picked up by another team.
Oh, yeah.
But no, we've seen guys go to other teams, get cut, and come back. I mean, BJ Finney's doing it right now.
Could you imagine 3 years from now? Oh,
that would be like 2005 divisional game, epic change of emotion. I'm just joking.
Yeah.
It's not that bad. Roller coaster of emotion.
Oh, no, we suck again.
Jordan Berry's back. I quit. Okay.
Any teams taking applications for fans? Like, goodness me.
Jeez, I don't know. How can a team that has had this much success be that bad at a position? That's what I want to know. And let's be honest, it's a pretty important position. It's a holder most of the time. And when did the backup quarterback stop being the holder? I remember that all the time. Tony Romo, famous, probably it. muffing the punt, muffing the what was it, extra point or field goal against Seattle. I mean,
I think it was an extra point. Yeah, lost the game.
Still, yeah, lost the game. It's crazy. I don't know.
Josh Dobbs could learn to do it.
Josh Dobbs isn't going to make the team.
And then if he messes it up, he can run. Like he can
but
run.
He's not going to make the team. He's going to get cut.
If Ben has a lot of sway, I don't know.
They'll trade him to Jacksonville for a 6th-round pick again.
Could you imagine? Oh, goodness me. It is the halfway point of the show, though. I know Jeff only signed up for 10 minutes, so if you want to run, you're welcome to stay. I don't think we're talking about punters for the second half, but
well, what are you guys talking about?
I think we're kind of going to break down some of the fun stuff that happened last week, right before the preview. That was super easy to plan for. That we were definitely jealous of going the day before all the news.
Not
breaking.
A lot of stuff to talk about. Yeah. Well, yeah. I'll let y'all at it. They've heard me talk about that stuff before, but it was good coming on. And it's my first. Big fan of the show.
Yeah,
long-time listener, first-time caller. Love the show. Standing Guy. Hey, I grew up listening to those guys. Anyone else? No, not you, Michael. But Geoffrey, did you remember Standing Guy?
Oh yeah,
I love that.
Love the show.
Hey, Stan Guy. First time, long-time listener, first-time caller. Love the show. All right, guys, take it easy.
Last thing, though, Jeff, before you're out of here, what's going to be on the preview tomorrow night? Do you guys have a topic for the people?
No clue. No, not at all.
We prep weeks for our shows.
We prep minutes. I could tell you what's going to be on Let's Ride for Friday morning, but I can't tell you. There's going to be a bloke from down under come joining me on Let's Ride. So it's one of two. You
not Jordan Berry.
Well, no. Hopefully it's one of them, not the other one. But
I actually would love to interview Jordan Berry and say, like, I would just let you. No, I would say that I'm not a big fan, but still, I'd love to ask him questions about like what's going on in your head. Like when you shank a ball in front of 65,000 people, like what's the first thing that goes through your head? That's all I want to know.
When you walk back to the sideline, how do you even like live with yourself?
Do you avoid Mike Tomlin or Danny Smith? How many pieces of gum does Danny Smith chew per quarter? Like these are things I want to know. I'd like. One of the Australian guys needs to get that interview set up. I'll do it. Gladly do it. All right, guys. I'll let you go. Go have a good rest of your show. Take
awesome. Thanks for coming on, Jeff. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Hartman, senior editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. We have a lot of fun here, but it is time to flip over to the second part of this show tonight. If you're listening on your podcast platforms, if it doesn't automatically switch for you, make sure to click over to part 2. If you're on YouTube or Facebook, hang tight for the second half of the curtain call. Pittsburgh Steelers fans, it is time for the second half of the Curtain Call podcast. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, and if you're not listening live, make sure you go back and check out part 1. That was probably the most fun I've had on one of these podcasts in probably ever, honestly. I laughed a lot in that, but it's to be expected with all the punter talk. Not as much punter talk in the second half, but Geoffrey, if you want to round out that for that first half of the show, how'd you feel with our guest joining us?
That's my first time on a podcast with Jeff Hartman, so it was fun. I had a lot of fun. I think I've gotten everyone. I haven't been on with Big Brosco, and I think he is it. The only person I haven't been on a podcast with.
I haven't run with the Aussies or Tony yet, so I think that's would be next on the list for me. Have you done anything, Tony?
I don't remember. This is terrible because I know like Brian was telling me something about my first, and I was like, that was my first podcast. When was that? Like, what did I didn't remember it at all. So it's quite possible Tony was on that one. I don't know. Like, I feel terrible because after a certain point, I don't remember things. Like, I'm just like, I don't know what happened. It was like months ago. Who knows?
Hey, up here in the Pacific Northwest, we're in the middle of like the craziest heat wave to ever happen in this part of the world. And I forget what happened 5 minutes ago, let alone what happened a couple months ago. So just sweating away up here. I'm trying to do it in Fahrenheit. I think it reached like 120. It feels like way hotter than that a couple days ago. So it's been toasty up here in Canada, which probably a lot of people wouldn't expect, but yeah, it's quite warm. But aside from that, Steelers talk. We should get back to that. I guess that's why we're here. Of course, a week ago, it was announced that the Pittsburgh Steelers were not going to be going to Latrobe. Literally minutes after our show pretty much concluded. It happened the very next morning. We get that announcement for Latrobe not hosting the Steelers for a second consecutive year. I want to get your initial thoughts on that, and as well as my kind of assumption on all this was because we see all these other teams being able to go places for training camp, and the way some of the players reacted, and by the way a lot of them didn't react at all, I think the players are kind of happy about it. Did you have any initial reaction about it not the team not going away for camp, and do you think this could be kind of player based why it didn't happen?
I doubt it's player based, but one thing to think about is the sheer number of players who have not been to Latrobe on this team. Lot. Like, there's a good number that have not done it. So, yeah, and to me, I think on the player side, I don't know. We've always heard, like, from a lot of the veterans, they kind of love it and they kind of hate it. Like, they hate being away from their family. They hate living in the dorms, but at the same time, like, you love leaving Latrobe because you've had this great experience as a team. You've had this bonding, but actually being at Latrobe kind of stinks. It's kind of like what it is. And it makes sense why the team would do it. You want that bonding. You want people get away from your family, get away from all the other stuff, come here, and it's football. Give us like a decent chunk of your summer where you're just here and it's just football. So I can understand why players would be like, hey, you know what? I'd rather be around my kids. I can get practice in and then go home to my family. I can see why that would be the case. But it's kind of half and half, is my opinion.
Now, I do believe teams like Dallas and Kansas City, I do believe the players stay in like luxury hotels compared to Latrobe being like crappy dorms, for lack of a better term. I feel like that might have a little bit on it. Like if you forget to like pack a mattress, which is probably not something you think of, but if you're just on a little piece of foam in the college dorm and you're rookie and that's not what you're thinking about, I'm sure that could probably ruin the experience a little bit. But do you think there's any mega difference from practicing at Latrobe, being at Heinz Field, outside of that kind of camaraderie thing?
Probably not. They've got state-of-the-art. It's probably a better place at the Steeler facilities. I know they've put a lot of money into Latrobe just to have the stuff that they need to make sure they're not really going without, but they're still not having all their stuff. They don't have all their, you don't have your locker room. You don't have all the stuff you're used to. It's a little different. So yeah, I don't think it'll affect performance. But I know it's a huge deal for the fans. Latrobe is such a big deal for fans because you really have great access to the practice. You can watch everything. You can see people. You can yell at players and they'll come over to the fence, which is exactly, in my opinion, why it wasn't going to happen and didn't happen. why they didn't get permission, because you can't keep track and control the fans, right? The fans are an uncontrolled element at Latrobe. And it's one of the best things about it is how close and personal you can be with the team. But at the same time, with another thing I do is I listen to a lot of stats stuff, and I've been listening to a lot on the COVID-19 for the past year or so. They're expecting there might be problems this summer, and the NFL looks at that and says, you know what, if you can't guarantee distance between the fans and players to the point that that there could be something in a worst case scenario, a team gets sick again. The NFL doesn't want that again. That was a nightmare last year. They did better than, people thought they were going to do. And it was still bad. It still is not what you want. Those Ravens games and the Steelers games getting moved around. And then Joe Hayden missing because of COVID. They don't want that. They don't want that. That affects your money. That affects your product on the field. So that's out. If you can't control it, then don't do it.
Do you have any pent up feelings towards other teams that were allowed to go? Do you care at all that other teams go? And historically, the Steelers always do this, and again, they're told no.
No, most of these people, most of the places they go, they're not going where there's fan access. They're not going where, they have that kind of closeness with the public. So it makes sense to me. It's just the NFL looking out for their money. That's all it is.
Yeah, and I totally get it too. But there was some other news that we should also get into, because there's a few kind of things that branched off it as well. From the last time we talked, of course, David DeCastro was released, Trey Turner signed, and there's been a bunch of stories that kind of revolved around that. To kind of start things off from square one, though, do you think Trey Turner could be better than David DeCastro in 2021? Is there any sort of comparison? Because I know they're both kind of in the same situation, both kind of very unhealthy last year, try and get healthy. Trey Turner supposedly is 100% according to himself, so take that however you will. David DeCastro, we know, is on the precipice of another ankle surgery. Do you think Trey Turner could be an upgrade?
If he's healthy, yeah. Over what we had last season at the end with David DeCastro, where, there were games he was awful. There were games you could tell that just wasn't there. His game was not there. Stuff was just affecting him enough that he wasn't good. So Trey Turner has that chance, but at the same time, he had a groin injury, right? And in Steelers history, we've had a couple of players in my time, a couple of really good players. Jerome Bettis started going downhill with his groin injury. He lost a lot of agility, and that's where he kind of fell off as that big, agile guy that he had been for so long. He lost a bit of his quickness. He lost a bit of agility with that groin injury. He wasn't the same guy, and he had to reinvent himself. And he that's where he started that kind of a decline into being a backup running back, and then reinvented himself just as a straight-up power runner his last couple of years, because he couldn't move like he did before. Lamar Woodley's the other one. Everyone talks about he got that new contract and then he stopped working out, but that's not really true. He was having a phenomenal season. He had a groin injury, and he was never the same again. He was never the same player again after that groin injury. Now, I know medicine has improved even in the last 10 years significantly. I know that, and I know other players do. I know a lot of players make it back from groin injuries, but there's a couple of examples there where players were just never the same guy again. So I have concerns about Trey Turner. I hope he's one of the guys that makes it all the way back. But it could be a thing that haunts him for the rest of his career, and he's just never that guy again. And I think that's one of the reasons you didn't see teams signing him, and he signed with the Steelers for $3 million after being a Pro Bowl guard. That's something teams are wary of.
Yeah, 5 consecutive years as a Pro Bowl guard, gets traded and hurt, misses 1 year, and now is a $3 million player. Crazy. Past him, what will you remember most about David DeCastro?
The Le'Veon Bell years. To me, it's DeCastro, Pouncey, and Foster. They're together. They were so great in those Le'Veon Bell years. Their inside zone runs, they were phenomenal. They were the anchor of the lines. I always laugh when people talk about the Steelers need an upgraded tackle. The Steelers don't invest as much at tackle. A lot of teams out there invest a lot in their tackles. The Steelers don't. The Steelers are always built from the inside of the line. And if they want to run outside, they can pull somebody. You know, they're not afraid to do that. And they really build from the inside out. So that interior line, DeCastro, Pouncey, Foster was so good for so long. And how just with Le'Veon Bell, they were just dominant. They just dominated the NFL more than even Ben Roethlisberger. Like as good as Ben was, as good as Ben is, he's a Hall of Fame quarterback, best quarterback the Steelers have ever had. He's even better than Bradshaw. So don't get me wrong here. I'm not criticizing Ben Roethlisberger or downplaying how good he is, but that interior offensive line, those three guys were better. Like together, they were more impactful on games than even Ben Roethlisberger. They were phenomenal. So for me, that's DeCastro's legacy. It's tied right in with Pouncey and Ramon Foster and how good those guys were in their prime.
Yeah, hey, as someone who considers himself a jersey collector, the only offensive line jersey I've ever owned, David DeCastro. One of my favorite players, of course, I was a center during my playing days. It never got a Pouncey, but David DeCastro, I think, because pretty local in comparison. Just a short, 2-hour trip down the road to get to where DeCastro's from, going to Stanford. I watched him play all of his career in college. Of course, Andrew Luck was on that team, so you could watch Stanford every single week if you wanted to, especially in the West Coast. And then to see him get drafted to the Steelers, that was honestly the happiest I've ever been for a Steelers draft pick. When he was falling down the draft board, I remember 10 years ago, I was 15. I was chanting DeCastro's name. I was like, oh my God, we're going to get David DeCastro. Then it happened. I just remember blowing up because we just got one of the best guards in football and he fell all the way to 24. How did that happen? Thank you, God.
That year I was on Behind the Steel Curtain in our draft, live article, live chat. I was in that with a lot of the other Behind the Steel Curtain people. And we were everyone was like, holy crap, DeCastro keeps falling. Come on. And when he passed the last team that was really looking for a guard, we were all freaking out. And when we got him, that was a huge deal. So really, David DeCastro is that guy because we all sat there and we're like, holy crap, are we going to get him? We can get him. And then he lived up to it. You know, he had that injury his first season, but after that, he was a stud every year.
Yeah. And I'll always remember it. Detroit had the pick before the Steelers. I was like, we're going to get Riley Reiff for David DeCastro. And then how it played out, Reiff went to the Lions. We get DeCastro. The rest is history. But beyond that, getting back to today, there have been some stories that have branched out from DeCastro getting released. And one of those things that keep getting brought up, especially by Mike Florio ad nauseum, is will the Pittsburgh Steelers lose a pick or some sort of financial fine, I guess. Financial fine is the best way to put it. But do you think that makes any sense? I know there's been stories that have ran it behind thesteelcurtain.com, a ton of dialogue in our Slack channel. To me, it doesn't make any sense. As Dave Schofield, the editor of Behind the Steel Curtain, has said, it just you'd have to list injuries from if someone got injured as a rookie, then you have to list that forever. Do you agree with that? Do you think the Steelers should be worried about some sort of pick problem because they didn't talk about David DeCastro's ankle injury in the injury reports last year?
Well, the big thing is he signed a clean bill of health at the end of the season. So this is not legally, right? Legally, whether it's true or not, legally, this is a separate issue, right? He was fine at the end of last season, and then he re-aggravated it or something happened in the offseason, and now he needs surgery. That's from that legal perspective. Could they get fined? I think it's going to be hard for the NFL to fine them. It isn't like the Ben Roethlisberger 2019 fine when he was injured in week 1. Missed practices in week 2.
Right, sorry.
Yeah, missed practices heading into week 2. And they listed him as missing practices for non-injury reasons. And then after week 2, when he went out, he talked about he missed practice and he was being evaluated. He missed practice and they were looking at his elbow. you can't say they're checking out his injury and he's going to miss practice while they're looking at this injury to see how bad it is, and then say, oh, he missed practice for non-injury related reasons. That's a fine, right? David DeCastro, they listed him as knee. When he missed practices, it was a knee. So a nagging ankle, that's not going to cut it. Like, that's not going to cut it. You consider 2017, they actually got away with listing Le'Veon Bell missing 3 practices in 2 weeks as being not injury related when he was hurt. He had that groin injury in the playoffs, the 2016 playoffs, and he ends up getting pulled out of the New England game. He had missed 2 practices that week for non-injury reasons. They didn't get fined for that one. So I really don't think you're going to see the Steelers especially lose a draft pick. I could see the NFL being like, look, this has gone on too much. This is your 3rd incident. Obviously, they only fined them for one of them, but this is your 3rd incident in only a couple of years here. Like, we're going to fine you. I can't imagine them losing a draft pick. Steelers are too well liked for that. They have enough clout in the NFL still. I don't think that would ever happen.
Yeah, at the very least, I guess I could understand a fine, but even then, I feel like that would be too much. I see no punishment for this. It doesn't make any sense to me. The other story that we definitely have to get to, though, of course, I'm going to take a stab at saying his name, Dejan Kovacevic from DK Pittsburgh Sports, had a story about Trey Turner signing originally and why the Pittsburgh Steelers brought him in from a source in the Steelers facility, saying that originally Trey Turner was brought in because they didn't think, the Steelers coaches, that is, didn't think Kevin Dotson was in football shape. Of course, that was disputed by a lot of people. Trainers posted pictures of Kevin Dotson looking pretty shredded for a 300-pounder. I don't know. What were your kind of initial thoughts on reading that, and what do you make of this story?
Well, I got a few thoughts. One thing, I know people who have worked with and know Dejan Kovacevic, and I know ones who don't like him, but will still tell you, if he says someone told him that, he has a source, and they told him that. And he was saying it's the same guy who was telling him about the David DeCastro situation, all this stuff. So there's some clout there. I don't think this is a media guy making stuff up just to get clicks. And the second reason I can say that is if this, he buried it in a David DeCastro article, right? This wasn't a big break. This wasn't something he was getting clicks on. It was behind the paywall. It was in a DeCastro article, almost as a side note, right? That they had originally brought in Trey Turner because they were concerned about Kevin Dotson. And even in his thing, he was like, that's crazy to me that they would say that. But also, I think it could be legit. I think you could see this as being legit from the Steelers side. I have a little story I like to tell here. A guy I grew up with, he was my friend's dad. He was a Mr. Football in Florida in the 60s. He was a running back. And he had stayed in pretty good shape. Like, he had tryouts with the Pirates and the Steelers after he moved up here to Pittsburgh in the 60s before Chuck Noll. I want to clear that up. In the 60s before Chuck Noll, he is in his 20s, and he had some tryouts, but he didn't make he didn't make it. But he talked a story about he would go to the YMCA. He had a group of guys. They worked out together, played basketball, stuff like that. They went there one day. They're getting ready to play basketball, and there's this guy just running laps around the gym, right? And they end up a player short, and he's like, and they were talking, they're like a player short, and he's like, hey, you guys, if you need an extra player, I'll play. Comes in, plays pickup basketball with them, like runs circles around it. The guy's just an incredible athlete, incredible physical shape. Then when they're tired and they take a break, he goes back to running. They come back out, play again. He goes straight from jogging, like actual jogging and sprinting and doing his runs, to playing with them again. All this stuff, does it for like 2 hours. And when they leave, he goes back to running some more, right? Talk to the guy later, finds out he's an offensive lineman for the Buffalo Bills. And the crazy thing is that guy got cut that year for not being in good enough shape, right? He wasn't in NFL conditioning form. And this story takes place in like the 80s, right? So NFL conditioning and someone being in good shape, like we think, oh, if you fail in NFL conditioning, if you're not in NFL shape, you're lazy and you're overweight. No, like conditioning is they're talking about very specific things you need to be working on, right? And if you're not working hard enough to balance and make sure you have all these things covered, you can be in trouble. And you can do things like get soft tissue injuries. Stuff like that can happen. So I can believe that the Steelers are worried about the direction he was taking in his training early on and said, you know what, let's schedule a visit with this guy, bring him in, just do our due diligence in case something happens with Dotson and we need a last minute replacement. We already have our due diligence done, which is something the Steelers always do. They always have lists of names. They always have those guys that they can call on in an emergency situation. And then the David DeCastro thing happens. They get word back from the doctors, whoa, David DeCastro is not going to be playing. Let's bring in Trey Turner. I think it's quite possible that the Kevin Dotson thing is legit, but I'm not worried about it. I don't think it's a real thing that they were concerned about. And honestly, if Dejan thought that was a legit story, right? If he thought that was a big news story, he would have pushed it. It would have been a headline. He would have pushed it. He had been trying to make money off that story because that's a huge story. Kevin Dotson not in shape. We're expecting to be a starter. That would be a huge story. He would have pushed it. He didn't. I think mostly it's a situation where, the word coming out from there, from his inside source, probably is a little exaggerated. He drops it down being like, whoa, this is weird, whatever. Drops it into a story and people read it, take it out of the story, take it out of the context and say, whoa, Kevin Dotson's out of shape. And that's not really the thing that they're looking at. I think it's mostly just a thing that's blown up on social media because of the nature of social media.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised by that either. With the Steelers' offensive line, we have seen a ton of turnover. Basically, no one's starting at the same spot they were at a year ago. Kevin Dotson, of course, is going to be like a first-time full-time starter. You got guys coming back from injuries. You got rookies. You got brand new players. Are you worried at all about the turnover on specifically at the offensive line? I know there's a few spots that are going to be very different, but basically it's a completely brand new offensive line. A lot of people want to write the Steelers off because of it, but do you have any concern about it?
Well, there is no one on this line that has entered a season as a starter and then played significant time. The only returning week one starter we have is, preseason, the guy who was supposed to start was Banner. Banner won the job. He didn't even finish the first week. He was out for the season before the first game ended. So this is game 2 of his starting career will be week 1, right? At right tackle. Chuks Okorafor entered the season as the swing tackle. He was forced to start. He started most of the season, but this is his first time coming in, penciled in, being like, hey, we need you to be the starter here. There's not really a competition. There's not a true competition for that job. It's his. You got Kevin Dotson, first year being a starter. BJ Finney, first year being a starter. If Kendrick Green takes over, obviously first year being an NFL starter for him. Right guard, brand new people. Nobody was on the team last year. Nobody playing right guard was on the team last year unless, oh, for goodness sakes, if J.C. Hassenauer has to start or, BJ Finney has to start at guard, then yeah, that's a problem. And then, Banner's back at right tackle. It's like a mixture of guys who need to step up, either, young guys who need to step into a bigger role or guys who haven't had these roles need to step into them. And then on the other side, you have guys that are trying to make it back to where they used to be. You've got Banner, you've got Trey Turner trying to make it back to a form they used to be. Even BJ Finney. Last year 2020 was a disaster for him. He's trying to get back to the 2019 guy who got a good contract because he played 4 games. He started 3 times for Marquise Pouncey and looked like a starter. He looked like a quality NFL lineman. And so teams were like, yeah, we'll get him. He can be a starter for us. And he's trying to get back to that form. Banner's trying to get back. Trey Turner's trying to get back. And a bunch of other guys are trying to step into roles they haven't had. So there's a lot of question marks. You want to say there's more question marks on the Steelers offensive line than any other team? Well, yeah. Every position is too deep with question marks.
Oh man, that's one of the big things entering this season. Like offensive line, if they're all as good as their potential would determine, and like reach the levels that they've already reached before, and just do it in a full season and be healthy, this could be a really good offensive line, and everyone will be like, "How did that happen?" But then if the injury things continue and the guys aren't ready to start in spots and Hassenauer has to play, like we mentioned, it could be a very long season. And like that's just the unfortunate part of this. And it's really hard to predict the Steelers team because there's so many question marks, like you said. Like if the offensive line's good, look out, because this team could be a juggernaut then, because then they'd have a great offense to go along with that great defense. If the offensive line sucks, well, we better start winning games 10-3, and that's a scary thing.
With a defensive touchdown.
Well, exactly. Well, that could only bail us out so many times in 2019.
Go that old Chicago Bears strategy of hope the defense outscores the other team's offense.
Don't even get me started on that. What I think about the Bears and specifically the 85 Bears, because people don't like my take on that being the most overrated team of all time. Anyway, moving on to some other stuff. The last thought of the show, really. The Steelers, of course, picked up a little bit more than $5 million after dropping DeCastro and adding Trey Turner. Now sit with a decent amount of cash in their pocket. Do you think any of that is spent before training camp?
Probably not. I don't know. Like, who's out there? Do you know who? I haven't looked really who's still out there.
There's two things that I could kind of see. One, there's no way a team's going to cut a good edge rusher. So yeah. I feel like, all right, like if they really do want to improve their third edge rusher position, like Justin Houston's still there. Like he had 8 sacks last year, and if he's willing to play for $5 or less million, I would consider it. The only other thing I would think of is if like Steven Nelson crawled back on his hands and knees and said, "I'll play for vet minimum like Vince Williams because no one actually wants me." That's really the only two moves I suppose could happen if Nelson wants to rebuild his bridges, or if they actually are desperate for a third edge rusher. That's the only thing I could see happening before camp. Does any of that make sense?
Houston. I would take Houston. He'd have to go for that David Castro money. I know there's other money sitting there, but when you look at what the Steelers typically do, that money's not going to get spent. That money's not going to be spent on players. So if he's willing to do it for $5 or even like $6 million, then Justin Houston would make sense. That would give them a really nice trio. Like that, you could tell Justin Houston, "Hey man, we'll use you when you want to be used." We can tell Alex Highsmith, you're going to drop into coverage and defend the run a lot. Justin Houston can come in on obvious passing downs.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. There's no way that the Steelers are going to roll into the season, in my opinion, with more than $13 million in cap space. I just can't see that happening. Especially for a team that's trying to win a Super Bowl at the end of these Big Ben years, as I throw up the air quotes for everyone listening podcast platform. Why have all that money if you're trying to take a run at things when you still got Ben and you got Juju and pushed all this money in the future? If you're going to make a run, spend the money, improve the roster. So I anticipate a move will happen. If it's between now and July 23rd or between July 23rd and September 1st, I would probably go with the latter on that. But as we have reached the top of the hour here, Geoffrey, is there anything you want to plug on our way out?
Yeah, the Vertex should be coming out here. It's a little later this week, but with Dave and I is about the loss of Marquise Pouncey and the replacement of potentially BJ Finney and what he brought in 2019. I get to dig into some 2019 BJ Finney film, some Devlin Hodges plays out there for you if you want to relive a couple years ago. Go check it out. That's all I have to plug.
Perfect. The last thing for me before we sign out here is I want to make sure everyone tunes into the Behind the Steel Curtain family of podcasts. Of course, we have those morning exclusive shows that you're only going to get wherever you listen to your podcast specifically, so therefore not on YouTube or Facebook. Like as this dropped today, as this episode, I should say, drops on a Wednesday on the podcast platform side. You can also listen to Jeff Hartman's Let's Ride. Of course, on Wednesdays, he has his mailbag. So make sure to check that out. Of course, already uploaded was my live mic, which dropped on Tuesday, looking at the Steelers defense and expectations that I want to see them hit in order for this to be a very successful team in 2021. Outside of that, again, click over to BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. Should be your one-stop shop for all things Pittsburgh Steelers. You'll find everything there from film rooms to analysis, breakdown, commentary. Heck, there could be a Tony Defio story up there that could just make your blood boil, which if you want that, by all means, click on it. Tony can get the people going, and we love them for it. So with all that being said, thank you for tuning in tonight. For my co-host, Geoffrey Benedict, my name's Michael Beck. We'll see you guys soon.